All right, so we have been doing HTML and CSS. So I'm going to talk a little bit about not just HTML, CSS. It's static. You write some stuff and you stick it up there, and it kind of stays the way it is. Everything is hard coded basically. So I'll just run this. Does anyone use Live Server or some similar plugin?
Yeah.
Yes.
I've used live server.
Yeah, there's a few. I like this one, so it makes it very easy. So I have the extension Live Server installed. So Live Server, it's this one by Ritwick Day. And once you have that installed, you can right click on an HTML document, for example, and just open with Live Server. And there we go. So now we have a local server running, which is going to serve up our host. So can someone tell me what's going on here?
That's your local host. That's your loopback address and the port it's running out of.
Okay, so this 127.0.0.1. This is there are a few different names for this. Yeah, loopback, localhost. But this is basically my machine talking to my machine. And in addition to the address, you also have, after this colon, you have a port number. So there's 65 or so thousand possible ports you can have. And most of the time you don't need to worry about what port you're on, but because we're kind of running this locally, we have to pay attention to the port. So this is port 5500. So now I know how to access this thing. And I go here in my browser to localhost port 5500. And because this server is running on this port, and it could be running on any port, but it's running on this port, so that's how I access it. And once I do, it basically, a server is just something that takes a request and makes a response. So that's it. So when I go here, I'm implicitly making a GET request to this location. And then when I do that, I have a server running, which is listening. It's listening for requests here. It's just listening. It gets a request. The request follows a certain format, which we'll see in the next week or so. And if the format, is correct, it follows the structure and the rules, the protocol, then it serves up a response, and that response is an HTML document. And then my the HTML document itself is basically just this. This is also an HTML document, but my browser doesn't show me this like my code editor. It knows how to render it, so it does. So if we look here, I think so what's this? I guess how many top level elements do I have in this document? You heard to see.
Did you say top level element?
Yeah.
What does that mean?
Um, so here, I guess, so we have an HTML node. So this is the opening and closing tag. So everything here is wrapped in an HTML tag. Within that HTML tag, so we can have, if I represent this like HTML, it's gonna autofill. Let me create another one. So HTML. Okay, so I have a HTML. You can think of these as nodes. An HTML node at the very top level, and within the HTML node, I have what?
The head and the body.
Yeah, exactly. So I have a head node and a body node. So I have head, body. And then if I look at the head, how many children does the head node have?
5.
Yeah. So it's got this meta tag. So this is a self-closing tag. So head requires an opening and closing tag. Meta is a self-closing tag. Title is not. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4. So I'll just, we'll just say we have some more. I'll just represent that like that. And then the body also, how many children does the body have?
2.
Yeah, exactly. So we have H1 and we have this div. We could do H1 div. I'm not gonna worry about this. Yeah, so we have H1 and div, and then how many children does the H1 tag have? It's got no children, and then div has, whatever, 25. So I'll just represent that like this. So you can think of an HTML document basically as a tree. So it's got a bunch of nodes, and there are parent nodes and children nodes and sister nodes. So when you look at a document, when you look at an HTML page, you don't necessarily think of a tree structure, but that's basically what it is. And as you start doing more, DOM traversal and manipulation, that'll be, I think, a little more obvious. Okay. So we have our HTML document. There's nothing much going on here. So what is the I guess, yeah, what is the H1 tag for?
The title on top of the page.
Yeah, it's meant to be the title. So these tags have these tags have semantic content or semantic meaning, which is usually not enforced by anything. It's just kind of a convention. But this H1 tag comes all at some level. Basically, all tags are the same. They're just possible nodes. But this H1 tag also comes with some built-in CSS actually. So yeah, this is meant to be for the main title of a page. That's the semantic meaning of this. What about a div?
I think it's just a section.
Yeah, it's kind of in some ways it's the most generic tag. It's often just used to structure other things. But okay, so we have the head, which has often meta information, and we have this link to the CSS page over here. So if you go take a look at that, we'll delete this. The styles.css, there's not a whole lot going on here, and I'm not gonna quiz you on the CSS, but what is this hashtag container?
A reference to the container ID, whatever's got that ID
Yeah.
attached to it.
So in ID, so that is this right here. So what is an ID?
I can't remember what weight it is, whether it's, I think it's higher weighted more than a class, but it's a way to differentiate certain things and select certain items if you want it to look differently or behave differently. I guess.
Yep. So yes, it does take precedence over class. And so what's the difference between class and ID?
Can't you only have
guessing-
one ID?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not really, again, this is not, it's not really enforced. It's not like HTML won't compile if you have more than one ID. But yeah, you're not supposed to. So the kind of semantic meaning of ID is that there's only one of them, that it's unique. And then class can be, lots of things. So lots of things can have classes. You can have multiple classes on one thing. There should only be, one ID for one tag. Okay, so and then CSS, we can target that ID using hashtag. And then what is this for?
My whole body.
Yeah. So we have a hashtag, and then so we target the ID. Nothing targets just the tag. So you have body, which is a tag. So this is everything. Basically, everything is going to have that property. You could also target H1. You could target div, and so on. Okay. And then items.
Yeah, that's just the styling for the whole class, the class items.
Yeah, exactly. So we have dot. So dot before and then items. So we know that items is a class. We know that container is an ID, and we know that body is a tag. Okay, and then we have something a little different here. Dot items : hover.
It's just an effect where you move your mouse over it and it'll do whatever, change the colors for so however long you set the timer for.
Yeah, it's called a pseudo selector, right? Is that pseudo selector?
I had to look it up.
But yeah, so that's what it's for. So there are a few of these. You can't just make up your own, but hover is one of them. So when I hover over it, it will basically use whatever CSS I have in here while I'm hovering, for example. So I change the background color. So I basically will override the background color. So items, things in the class item, all these divs have the class of items. So everything that has the class items is aquamarine, but when I hover, this overrides. Basically, it will override whatever I'm hovering. And then it also runs this animation. So to make an animation, it's actually not that hard, and CSS is pretty easy to copy paste, but you have this at keyframes, you give it a name, and then there are some other things you can do here, but so this is the starting position and the ending position, and then this is how long it will run. So it will take 2 seconds to go to transform from 0 degrees to 360. So there's lots of things you can do here with CSS. It's a pretty, it's pretty wide open, which is one reason we don't spend a lot of time talking about it. But yeah. So that's that's the basics of HTML and CSS. So now what I'd like to do is basically recreate this HTML page, but without any actual HTML. So I'm gonna get in the folder. So I'm gonna go ahead and I'm gonna stop this server here, local server. Close this down, and I'm gonna create an HTML page. And I'm gonna use the exclamation mark to get me the boilerplate out of the way. And okay, so I'm gonna call this, I guess it doesn't matter what I call it. So I don't want to have anything in the body, basically. I'm just gonna leave this blank. And instead of that, I'm gonna build everything using JavaScript. I'm gonna create everything dynamically with JavaScript. So app.js, the JavaScript file, you can call it kind of whatever you want. When we get to React, you'll see something like app.js. So I've got this here. So I'm going to go ahead and just do a console.log. And then I'm going to run this in live server. And I've got this, I can see that I'm, serving up the correct HTML page, but there is nothing there. And I don't see the console log here. So this, the grid is working. So I think the HTML is actually rendering, but I'm not seeing my JavaScript.
You have to add a like the script tag.
Yeah.
I don't know if it's at the top or if it's at the bottom of the HTML.
Yeah. So there's you can put it either in the head or in the body. Either one will work. I think the standard now is to put it in the top. So script. And then, so we have a script tag, and then there's a couple attributes. Source, this is going to be basically the relative path to our JavaScript file. So app.js. And then you can also, the HTML document is going to get loaded in order. So if I have, for example, if I load my JavaScript first, if I load my JavaScript file first, and that runs a bunch of stuff or assumes that the elements exist, and then after that it will load the actual HTML, I could have an issue where my JavaScript is expecting certain elements to be there and they haven't loaded yet. So you can avoid that problem, one, by putting it at the bottom of the body. Excuse me. So it will load after everything else. Or you can put it at the top and have this like defer keyword here. So you're basically putting the script at the top, but it's not going to run until everything's loaded. There are lots of like loading tricks, which I'm not an expert on, but if you work at Facebook or something, you have to worry about millisecond load times. Okay, so we've got the script tag here. So now if I save this, so live server will do a hot reload. So every time I save it, it will reload. So I don't have to like turn the server off and then on again. So now I can see that console log shows up. So I have my HTML and my JavaScript. They're connected now. All right. So once they're connected, I'm going to start basically writing a bunch of functions that are going to allow me to manipulate whatever is here. So before I do that, I think I'll just show you real quick here. So have people used the DevTools before? Have you guys been using that?
I have,
Okay.
but we just touched on it briefly the other day here.
Okay. Yeah, so the DevTools are pretty important from here on out. So this is not open. Let me open another page. So example.com. So to open the DevTools, there's a couple ways you can do it. You can right click and then inspect. If you're on Chrome, something you'll have something similar on other browsers. Every browser has something like this. You can also use a shortcut if you're on a Mac, Option Command I, and that will open this up. So we have the DevTools open now, and there are a few different tabs, actually several tabs. Let me expand this out. So we'll see this later. You can actually switch to, you can kind of emulate a phone screen. So this, as you're developing your apps, you'll probably want to take a look at this because, your CSS can be different depending on the size of the monitor, but that's just there for fun. So we have this, like phone, basically you can change the screen size. And then we have elements. And elements is going to show you basically your HTML document, but in a in this kind of format. And you can actually manipulate this. Obviously you're the only one doing this, but you can play around with stuff and see what it looks like. And we have p tags. You can also come here and right click on something if like I want to get more information about this. What's right here, I can right click on it and inspect, and it will jump right over. It jumped right over to this p tag. So what I clicked on is this p tag, and then I can see here's the text right here. And you can see the structure here. This is a very, basically as simple as it gets, but it's got a body and then div, and then inside of that is an h1 tag and a p tag, and inside of this p tag is an a tag. So what's an a tag for?
I think it's called the anchor.
Yeah.
Which had the external link.
Yep. Yeah. So it has this property href, and if you click it, it will redirect you to whatever link you have there. Okay. And then so that's basically for the HTML document. There's also you can also see CSS here. So you can see if you click on, I'll right click here, inspect, and because I've targeted this, now this is highlighted, this H1 element right here, and then under styles you can also see the CSS that's being applied here. So display, block, font size, 2EM. What's EM?
That emphasis.
I can't remember what it stands for, but it's some sort of, instead of pixels or I can't remember what it's called, what it is.
Yeah.
Way to size the font.
Exactly. Yeah. So 1 EM, I think, I forget exactly. I think it's like the size of maybe it's like 12-point font or something. But anyway, it's a relative measure, but it's locked into font size. So 1 EM is like, yeah, I could look this up, but there are a number of measurements. Some of them are relative, like EM. Some of them are absolute, like pixels. And there's other things as well. You shouldn't have to worry too much about anything other than pixels and EM. Okay, so you can actually see all of these, and then the console. If you go into the console, this is where you can do JavaScript stuff. So console.log. Hi. And we get hi. So basically, you can do JavaScript stuff here. In addition to that, in addition to JavaScript, there's also a bunch of there's a browser API. So there's a whole bunch of stuff that's available to you in the browser itself. It's not a part of the core of JavaScript, but you can use it in the browser, like alert, for example. So I'm here. The scope that I'm in is actually called window. That's like the global scope for your browser. And this has, a whole bunch of stuff like alert that you can use. Basically, an overwhelming amount of stuff. So alert, I can call alert here. And if I execute that, I get a pop-up alert. If I try doing the same thing here, that doesn't work because here we're not running in the browser, we're actually using Node. We're using Node as the environment to execute JavaScript. And because Node is basically a server-side environment, it doesn't have alert. Alert is something specific to the browser. So there's some minor differences as you do stuff in the browser versus in Node, but for the most part, it's the same. Okay, so in addition to fun browser stuff, you could also open a new tab. You can traverse the DOM tree. So this HTML document gets represented not just as a text file or whatever. It gets represented as a tree. So, and it's called the document object model, or the DOM. And there's a DOM API, a set of a way of manipulating the DOM and accessing it that's available to us in the browser. And the way it works is you can grab elements by different properties. So you can grab elements by their tag. So I want to get an H1 tag. You can grab elements by their ID. So get me the tag with the ID of whatever, and class and so on. So you can grab elements by their properties, and then you can also manipulate them. So you can change their class. You can add a class. You can change a CSS property. You can change the font. You can do basically anything you can do just here in the index HTML or CSS. You can do just with JavaScript. You can also create new elements and then attach those elements to the DOM. So if I wanted to create a new, let's say I want to create a new H1 tag. So I can do that. The first thing I have to do, there's like a 3-step process that you have to do if you want to create a new element. The first thing is you have to figure out where you want to put it, and then you have to insert it as a child. I deleted this, but you have to insert the new element as a child of a parent, basically. So you find some parent node, and then you will insert it. So you have to find basically the parent under which you want to insert your node. Then you have to create your node, and then you can modify your node. And once you do all that, then you can actually insert it, and you'll see it. So we're going to follow this process, and we're going to do this a few different times with other elements as well. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is, where do I want to put this? Well, I want to put it on top. It's H1, so I want it to be the first thing here. And the topmost element, or the outermost element that I have access to for our purposes is the body, basically. So I can look here in the elements and I can see, okay, I could put it here in this div. This is also effectively wrapping everything in the body, but I'm going to put it in the body. So that's my parent, so I'm going to grab that. So I'm going to call it body equal document, and document is the way that you access your HTML document. So this document object has a bunch of methods that you can do stuff with, and there's a whole bunch of ways to grab things. I'm just going to use query selector for everything because I think it's the simplest, but there's like 10 different ways to do this. query selector. So document.query selector. And then I'm going to pass a string to query selector. And the string is going to be whatever I want to use to grab something. So this is going to follow the conventions of your CSS. So if you want to grab something by ID, you do hashtag and then whatever. If you want to grab something by the tag name, it's just the tag name. By class, dot, and then the class name. Okay, so I want to grab the body, so I'll just pass in body. And then if I type in body, it will show me. So here I have access to the body. Okay, so I have access there. So now I'm going to basically take a step back and I'm going to create an H1 element. So I'll just call this my H1 equal document dot create element. And then to create element, I'm going to pass it a string, which is going to be the kind of tag that I want. In this case, I want to create an H1 tag, so I do that. My H1. So you can see I've created an H1 element, but where is it? Can I see it in my document here? So this is basically just floating out here. So I've created it, but I have to attach it to the DOM if I want to actually see it. So I have a reference to the parent. I want to put it under the body. I've created the element. So now this element exists, but it's just like, the most generic H1 possible. So I want to add some text here. So you can do that. There's a property. So my H1 dot text content. There are a few of these properties, but I can directly change this now. So and now if I take a look at my H1, I can see that it now has, text in between the tags. Okay, so now I figured out where I want to put it, which is the body. I grabbed the reference to that. I created the element that I want. I've modified it. I could also add some CSS. So let's add a CSS property. So my H1 and dot style dot ground. I'll change the background color, and this will be equal to. You can pass in whatever. There are a number of colors that you can basically use just by a string. There's also hex codes and other things like that, but so we'll be boring and do gray. Okay, so now I've created this element, I put text in it, and I have changed the CSS. So now what I want to do is insert that. Okay, so in order to insert that, I'm going to grab the body. So body dot insert. Let me see, what is that? Body dot insert child. Append child. Append child. So there's a whole bunch of these, by the way. You can like skip few, or you can search for one and blah blah blah. So again, there's a lot of flexibility, maybe too much flexibility here. I'm just going to use append child, and then I'm going to pass it the node that I want, the element that I've just created, which is my H1. And once I execute that, Okay, so this actually it actually appended it after everything else. So there are ways to do this, but I'm not gonna waste time doing that. But here we can see this element now exists, and if I look at the elements here, I can see it right here. So I have this inline style now. I can see the text content. So this I've just using JavaScript, I've now modified the HTML. Okay, any questions about that?
Yeah, if you took that entire line that you modified and just threw it into like a blank document and open that in your browser, would it show that? Is that what it would represent as well? You don't have to insert it into HTML, it would just show, or no, it doesn't work like that.
So if I like just copied the text here, let me go to where's this sources index. I don't know if this is going to show up here. So if I copy this line and like paste it into this HTML here or something, is that what you mean?
Yeah, I mean, essentially what I'm asking is, no, like without the HTML, because it's basically is just, I know it's modifying the HTML, but it's doing all the same things without actually using HTML. So I guess what I'm asking is, can you just use JavaScript to create web pages instead of HTML?
You mean like from nothing?
Yeah,
Yeah, I've never there might be the issue is that the browser
it won't interpret it properly because you're
I
essentially
think
doing
in
the same
theory,
thing.
yeah, in theory you could just send it like a JavaScript file and then say execute the JavaScript file, and it could,
Right, and it would be just basically HTML, but it looks like it's in JavaScript form. Yeah.
yeah. So you can do that. I don't think anyone ever actually does that. It may be possible. I suspect that browsers just wouldn't let you do that. But if you made your own browser, I think you could definitely do that.
Yeah, I was really just curious because I mean, it's essentially the same thing as HTML. It just looks easier to write in line like that.
Yeah. I think the difference is that if you make a request, so one issue is that we can look at the network tab as well. So look at the network tab, I'll refresh it, and you can see the network activity. I'll look at the headers here. So example.com, I made a request there. I see the headers. So here are the response headers. Here are the request headers. Let's see. Let me see real quick. Yeah, so here's where I make the request and I send with the accept header. So this is basically predetermined formats. So this is what my browser will accept as a response. So it'll accept text or HTML and so on and so on. So basically anything here, but if you look at the response, it should say yeah, the content
Under
type header.
content type. Yeah.
Text HTML. So it's telling my browser, hey, I'm sending you HTML basically. And if you just send it a JavaScript file, then I'm not sure that there's a official content type header, which is just JavaScript. But there could be. These are all just conventions. Okay. So So now we're actually going to do, we're not going to start from 0. We'll start from this, most basic HTML document, but we'll basically create a web page just using JavaScript here. All right. So yeah, I think we have a good idea of how to, are there any questions about DevTools? So there's a lot of stuff happening with the DevTools. You can play around with it. I, would recommend playing around with it. There's a lot of useful information here, but elements, console, the network tab. Network tab we'll use more soon. We start talking about requests. Okay, we'll close this. Let's go back to this, our document. All right, so first thing I'm going to do is basically I'm going to create essentially like a runner. I'm going to create a function that's going to execute all the other functions in the order that I want. And I'm going to set this up window. So because I'm going to run this in the browser. I can access the window. And then this is actually an event. So I'll talk more about events shortly, but for now I'm just going to set this up so that I don't have to worry about it. And this event, I'm going to listen for a load event. There's a number of predetermined events. One of them is load. So when the page loads, then this callback function will be executed. And then here, I'm just going to put all the functions that we're going to write. So if we look back here, so we want to basically recreate this page. So first thing I'm going to do is I want to create an H1 element. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to write a function called create H1. And then I'm going to follow the same pattern where I want to ultimately create an element and stick it on the DOM. So I have to find a suitable spot to put it there. I grab a reference to that, I create an element, and then I insert it. So I want to put this in the body. So let body equal document that query selector, and I'm just going to use body. So there's query selector and query selector all. Query selector will just return a single element. Query selector all will return you essentially like a list or an array of elements. And query selector will return the first one that it finds. So there's only one body, so you don't need to worry about it. But if you wanted to, let's say if you had a bunch of p tags and you wanted to target a specific one, you couldn't just do query selector p, because it's going to just return you the first p tag. Okay, so we've got a reference to the body. Now we're going to create our element, h1 document dot create element. And is this large enough that you guys can see, by the way? If it's not, please tell me.
It's fine.
Okay, so we have this h1 element, and then I want to insert some text. So h1 dot text content equals what do we have here? Welcome page. Okay, I won't do anything else for now. And then so we have a reference where we're going to put it. We create it, we modify it, and now we're going to insert it. So body dot append child, and that is going to be h1, that node that we're creating. Okay, so once I have that function, I think it should work. I'm going to call it here. So create h1. And now I refreshed it, and because this says hot reloading, it's as soon as I save it, it's gonna refresh the server, and I can see this is here, and I can double check, is this really an H1? Well, I can look in the DevTools, and I can see you don't need to worry about this. This is something that the live server does, so you can just ignore this part. But the welcome page is right here. So here's the H1 tag that we created. Okay. And then next we'll do a div, which is going to be our container. So here I'll do create and I'm going to also do the let body equals query selector body. Oops. And then I'm gonna create the element. So let div equal document create element, and then that will be a div. And then our this div, we want it to have an ID. So well, we also want to have text content. So div dot text content equals actually we don't. Yeah, that doesn't have. Oh, so div dot I think you can just do div dot ID. You might have to do styles. Or we'll see if this works. So div dot ID, and that will be, we'll just call it container. And then I'm going to insert that. So body dot append child, and then that will be the div. Save it, refresh, and so I can't see it here. Does anyone have any idea as to why I can't see it here?
You didn't call it?
Yeah, exactly. So I wrote the function, I defined the function, but I didn't actually call it. So now I can see that I have this div, and I guess the ID did work. So I have a div that has an ID of container. So that works. Now instead of doing this, I'll leave this here, but I'm actually going to define all of these styles inline. So I'm going to go here and I'm going to see what this requires. I'll split this right. And instead of giving it a container and then having a separate CSS sheet or something like that, I'm going to do div.style dot display equals grid, and then div.style dot grid template columns. So notice that here we have dashes. It's all lowercase and they're dashes. The kebab case, I think that's called. And then here we have camel case. So there's a difference between CSS in CSS and CSS in JavaScript. So minor difference, but something to be aware of. Okay, so that is going to be repeat. I'm going to pass in just this string here. And then we'll do one more. So div.style.grid template rows equals one FR. Okay, so now if I save this, I can see that we have all of these other style properties. Okay, so we've got our container element. So now we need to create a whole bunch of divs. And this could obviously be very tedious, but since we're in JavaScript, we don't have to hard code this or copy paste it. It'll be nice and clean. And so we'll write a function called create boxes, I guess. And then, so I'll grab the body, copy this. Actually, both of these will be the same. So I'm not gonna worry about, you know, refactoring this. There's obviously some common stuff that can be factored out, but I'm just gonna leave that. And then I'm not gonna worry about assigning this to a class because we're gonna do that. And then I'm gonna, for each one of these, so for let I equal 0, I is less than, actually we'll do, yeah, 1 while I is less than 26, I plus plus. So here's where we're gonna create everything. So we're gonna create 25 divs, and they're all gonna have the same CSS properties here. So div dot background color. Oh, div dot style. Equals aquamarine. Div dot style dot border equals 1px solid black. Div dot style dot padding equals 30 pixels. Div dot style dot margin 4 pixels. And then text align center. Yeah. Text align. Okay. So I have a reference to this parent container. I'm going to create all these and then I'm going to attach them. So body, append, child. Oh, and also the text content. I need to add the numbers. So div dot text content equals I. All right, refresh this. And that did not work because I didn't call the function. Create boxes. So that's not quite right here. Let's see, what did I miss?
I think you just did the columns, but not the rows. Oh, never mind. I see the rows. My fault.
Should it, let me see here. There's 25 of them. I'm not really focused on the CSS, so maybe it's not worth the time, but let me see. Oh, I think I need to attach them to the div, not the body. So yeah, that's the problem, attaching them to the body. So let so I'm gonna grab this by ID. So I think we gave, yeah, we did give this an ID, so that's convenient. So this calls container. Man, container. And then I'm gonna do container. There we go. Okay, so now we have all of these boxes. Okay, so I'm not gonna I'm gonna stop here and then I'm gonna do a couple other things. So we've got we're almost at, let's see, we started it. Yeah. All right, I'm gonna go ahead and power through. I know it's been a little long on the lecture, but I'm just gonna try and wrap it up real quick. All right, so I'm gonna do, actually, All right, do you guys want me to try to knock this out in the next 15 to 20 minutes, or do you want to take a break?
Let's just
I'm
knock
fine
out.
with just keep going.
Yeah, keep going.
All right. That's what I wanted to hear. All right. Okay, so we've got now like basically our HTML page, let's say. So we're happy with this. We've created it all dynamically. If we look at our actual HTML, there's pretty much nothing there. So this body is empty, but we've filled it up just using JavaScript. Now we want to do stuff. So JavaScript, you definitely can, create HTML documents basically just using JavaScript, but that's not really what it's for. It's for adding behavior basically to the web page, and the main way you do that is by adding event listeners. So we're going to add an event listener to a box. So there's a whole bunch of events. There's like, I don't know how many events there are, 100 maybe, I don't, could be more, maybe less. But basically anything you do has an event. So scrolling, moving over something, moving away from something, pressing a key down, releasing a key. So there's, this onload, loading is also an event. So there's just a ton of events that you can listen for. And if an event occurs, so if someone does something basically that that you're watching for, then you can execute a function. And that's what we're going to do. And you can do whatever you want in the function. You listen for a specific action, like when X happens, execute this function. So in order to do that, you have to create something called an event listener. So function create, and we'll create an event that will, let's just say when you click on, whoops. Anyway, I messed up this, so it's not loading right now. But let's say when you click on a box, it will change the background color or something. So let's do create color change list. All right. And the way it's going to work is we have to choose what element we want to add the event to. And so I'm going to say if someone clicks within our container div, then we'll change the color. We'll try and change the color of that that element that's clicked on. Yeah. Okay. So first off, we're going to grab the container, and that actually is right here. So I'm going to copy this line. So document.querySelector #container, because that is an ID. And I'm going to do container. There's a couple ways to do event listeners. One is this way. So there's on and then the event. I think this is newer. I'm going to do it the older way here. So .add event listener. And add event listener takes two parameters. One is the event as a string, and the second one is the callback function. So click. So we want to listen for a click event, and we want to execute a function. And this function takes the event. So the event is an object with a whole bunch of information on it about what happened. So we may or may not use that. So we're going to grab the event, and then for now, let's just console log the event. So now I'm going to add this to our runner here, and we'll see if that works. All right, so I'm going to go to the console so I can see the console log, and if I click on an element here, If I click over here, nothing happens. If I click within this div, then stuff happens. So here is the event. There's a whole bunch of stuff on it. Almost none of this we're gonna need, but here's like the X and Y coordinates. Let's see. Target. So this is what we're gonna care about for our purposes, but there's a million things you can look at. So event.target. And I'm gonna click here and see. I can see I clicked here and it shows me the div that I clicked on, the event's target. So the click is the event and the target is what I clicked on, the element that I clicked on. If I click here, you see that this is 19. So with that information, I could actually change the color. So I can do e.target dot background color equals, let's see, I'm just gonna look up, create a random. Hopefully there's something I can copy paste. Cool. Let's see if this works. All right, I'm gonna try this out and we'll see if it works. Go back here. Doesn't look like that works. Let me. See. I'm gonna go in the console and just paste this in and see what it gives me. Is there another thing that I have to add something to the
Do you
file?
need to concatenate the hash symbol before it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you. So there's a few different formats for colors. It's like RGB. Anyway, you'll see there's a whole bunch of ways you can express a given color. And okay, so let's see.
You have to import the math.
I shouldn't have to. Let's see. Math.random. Those seem to be looking. This. I'm just going to copy this whole thing. There's something dumb I'm doing. Yeah, actually, maybe there's an issue with how I'm targeting the element. There we go. So now, every time I click, it's a new event. So it's always listening for an event, and then I'm creating a new random color here. So there's a console log. I did. Okay. Okay, so that's one event. So we added an event listener. We targeted this outer div which contains everything. We added a click event, which means now this div is basically just waiting for someone to click on it. And when it does, it generates an event, and that event has a bunch of information that we can then use to react to that. In this case, we want to find out what element we clicked on, and then we're gonna grab that through the target property. There's a whole bunch of others, and then we're gonna modify. So this e.target is a div, and then the style property and the background color. Yeah, so that's that. So that's an event. There's a whole bunch. Yeah, as I said, there's like a million events. I'm gonna do one more thing real quick. So we're gonna talk about making API requests on Saturday. We've seen this a little bit with Python, but we haven't talked about it a lot. And with JavaScript, it's the same basic idea, but it's a little bit different because you have to do it asynchronously in JavaScript. And we haven't talked about async stuff yet, but I'm just going to introduce this, and then we'll talk a little bit more on Saturday and then more later. But this is just the first exposure, so don't worry about understanding it. So I want to create another event. And what I want to do is above the welcome page, I want to do like a fake, I don't know, fake login or something. So I'm going to create another element, which is going to have someone's name. And every time I click this, I want to make a request to a server and get a name from that server and then display that name here. So I want to listen for a click event. And when that event happens, I want to make a request to some other server and then get back a response, and then take that response and insert it into the DOM. Okay, so function get, let's do add random name. And I'm gonna grab not the container, with the body. I'll do the H1. So I'll grab it by the H1. Okay, I guess I just have to do it. So let H1 equal document dot query selector, and H1 is just a tag, so I don't need anything special. I'm going to grab that, and then I'm going to add an event listener onto it. So H1 dot add event listener, and that event listener is also going to be a click. I'll use a different one. I'll do let's do mouse over, I guess. No, that might be too much. Yeah, I'll just do click. I don't want to. If I do mouse over, it might. I have to look up what the event does, but I don't want to make like 50 million requests to the server. So, okay. So click, and then callback function, which is going to take an event. And the trick here is that, so here within this function, I'm going to have to make an asynchronous network request. So it has to be asynchronous because JavaScript is single threaded, and I don't want to lock this as I wait for the request to come back. So if it were 100% synchronous, then I would make a request and I wouldn't be able to do anything on this page for the however long it took to get that response back. Sometimes that's not a big deal, but if it's like, Twitter, where you're making, I don't know how many hundreds of requests all the time, then you would basically never be able to do anything if it were not asynchronous. Okay. All right, so do add event listener. So I'm going to show you this API. What is it? JSON placeholder. I've used this before. /3. So this is a free, very easy to use, good for learning. JSON placeholder, blah blah blah. And so they have users, they have fake, fake users, fake, blog posts, stuff like that. So this is going to return a JSON object with some stuff, and I just care about the name right now. So I'm going to use this. I'm going to make a request here. And the way you can do that is JavaScript under the hood. This all uses something called promises, but there's syntactic sugar, which makes it a lot easier to work with. So I'm going to use the syntactic sugar, which is async await. So I know I'm going to do something asynchronous in this function, so I'm going to mark this function as being asynchronous, and I do that async. So now this callback function is asynchronous. All right, so I'm going to do let response, whatever this is going to be, is I'm going to use the fetch API. So this is built in. This is built into the browser. I can use this. So fetch await. I have to call await. Wait. And I'm going to pass this in. Okay, and then okay, so I have this here. I'm going to grab this, and this is going to return to me actually another promise. This is just how this works. This particular fetch API works. It's going to return me another promise, which I'm going to have to await again, and I need to convert that to JSON. So okay, and once I do that, then I have access to the actual the object, right? Which in this case it's going to be this. So I want to get the name property off of this object. So return, actually, yeah. So let name equal JSON dot name, and then once I have that name, I can add it to let's see. Actually, I'm going to create a new h1 tag as well. Let new h2 equal create element. I'm going to create an h2 element, and then I'm going to attach. Yeah, I'm going to attach it. So h1 dot append child new h2. So I'm gonna go ahead and append it here. It's not gonna have any content, and then once I get a name, I'm gonna change that. I'm gonna change that value. So I have to grab it first, actually. So let h2 equal document dot query selector, and I think I just have one h2 element, so that should be fine. And then I'm going to do h2 dot inner HTML or inner text is name. All right, we'll see if this works. Add random listener, random name listener. It's not random yet. We can tweak that. All right, so I'm going to go here, and if I click here, I still have my other color changer stuff. But if I click on this one, I should get something. I got something. It's not what I want, but I can look at the network tab because I'm making a network request. And let's see. So here is the request that I made. I made a get request. Let me try it one more time. Okay, so not sure why that is. So I'm going to go console log the response that I get first. Console.log. and this is undefined. So this is something that you're gonna encounter. So I forgot to do something. So this is async, but I neglected to mark this part as async. So I'm going to show you just what this looks like. So if I were to console log press JSON, you'll see that this is a promise. And promises are very tricky. We'll see some more of them later, but this is actually a promise, and you can't really do anything directly with a promise, unfortunately. So we have to await it. And when we await it, we should be able to access the name. And if we click this again, it's going to be the same name every time, but you can see that this is actually incrementing. So to make that random, math.random. Yeah, let me just look up JavaScript random. Yeah. You can do this. I'll copy that. I'll just throw this function in there. And instead of, we don't want 0, so I'll add a 1. And this URL, I'll make this, how do you do that in backticks? I don't know how many users there are, but I'll say we'll max out at 10. So hopefully I will now get a random user every time. Okay. So all this stuff still works as well. Okay, so some of this, the API stuff, I just wanted to give you a first look at it. If it doesn't make a lot of sense, don't worry about it. We'll talk more, but this is the fetch API. This is how you make network requests from a web page, in JavaScript. Are there any questions about, grabbing elements or manipulating things or event listeners?
So when you modify the style, what happens to the CSS file then? Because you have it in both places now.
This actually doesn't have a CSS file.
Oh, okay.
This just has the HTML and the JavaScript. So this page has no CSS file with it. It's all created from JavaScript. This is not the preferred way to build an actual web page, but just to show you that you can do all of this. Okay. Yeah. So that's it.